Hi there. In my last video, we talked about how to generate hope, and I gave some practical examples of that. And at the end of that video, I promised that there would be 9 guidelines. In fact, I've come up with 10 guidelines for generating hope. And as you will be aware, when I talk about hope in this context, I'm not talking about wishful thinking, where you hope that something or someone will come along and rescue the situation. I'm also not talking about convincing yourself, where you have to use energy to make yourself feel better. And I'm also not talking about positive thinking in that superstitious way of thinking, well, if I just think positively, then I'll attract the right circumstances. Positive thinking is useful if it leads to positive action. Otherwise, it tends to lean a little bit towards that, what I call superstition. And if you saw that video, you will see that I figured out that there were certain things I was doing that enabled me to end each day with hope. And I went and analyzed that, and I noticed that there were replicable actions that were under my conscious control, and therefore that I could do that. And I said, when there's tough times, it's important to be doing that on a regular basis, daily if you can. And we saw that meaningful hope is based on real action towards a real possible future event, one that involves you. And so today we're going to have a look at these 10 guidelines, and these will hopefully assist you to generate hope for yourself in tough times, and also that you can apply them as a leader if you're leading a family, leading people in a business, in a company, even if you're leading a government. And don't we know, our government leaders certainly need to learn how to inspire a little more hope than they currently do. So let's go and take a look at these. The first one is that hope is about the promise of a better future. I mean, that's obvious, but it needs to be stated. It's important. There's got to be something better to look forward to tomorrow than today. The next one is that there needs to be both a far and a near future, by which I mean you need to have a bigger goal, a purpose that you're working towards, that ultimate goal. If you're on your own, it might be to create a certain business, to be able to retire, to be able to support your kids, put them through university, buy a particular house. It may be beyond that to create a certain scale of business or to go and change the world. You're always working within that bigger context. Then you need that smaller goal, particularly in tough times. So when things are easy, sure, you can have one prospect out there in 3 weeks and it's like, okay, great, let's cruise along until we get there. In tough times, you need to be creating possibilities for yourself almost daily. The ones that get you through the long night, the ones that get you to the next day and keep you going one day at a time. And that leads us to the third guideline, which is that even a tiny amount of hope is sufficient, especially in tough times. I mentioned that just the idea of sending out an email and that somebody might get back to me on this idea, even though the last person didn't get back to me on the last one, and there's all these outstanding stuff, I've created a new possibility, a new level of hope. And that little bit of hope, when you wake up at 3:30 in the morning, I hope I haven't started something when I say that, and you start to feel that panic and despair and you can't sleep, and you can bring your attention to that little bit of hope, you'll be amazed how powerful that can be, and just calming you down enough to get you back to sleep. So you literally take it one day at a time. So that brings us to guideline number 4, which is that hope is based on taking the next realistic step and not on chasing rainbows. So even when times are going well, it's never a good idea to have as your main objective, developing the killer app that's going to turn you into the next billionaire and take over the world, or winning the lottery. What you really want to be doing is focusing on the next basic elementary step of the goal. So in this case, in tough times, you basically just want to win that next piece of business, which a good way to approach that is thinking about who needs your help, who can you offer it to, in a way that they might want to remunerate you. When you approach it like that, you come across as less desperate, which is valuable in those times, and it's more realistic, it's more grounded. The bigger picture can take care of itself. And in order to support you to do that, it's very useful and important that you are willing to live within your means. Number 6, for hope to be meaningful, it must be underpinned by action. So this is not a mental idea, a notion of wishful thinking, hoping that someone will come and rescue the situation. I've said this before. It's not about convincing yourself. That takes too much energy. And it's not about positive thinking in that superstitious sense. Positive thinking, sure, if it leads to positive action, but the action is what's needed. When I gave that example about booking the ticket to go to Maldives or Cape Town, immediately you took the action, it had a positive impact on your current state of being. Same thing when you create a new opportunity for yourself, one that you haven't had enough time to start analyzing whether it means something that they've got back to you or not. It's fresh it has an immediate impact on your state of being. And those are the little ones that get you through. But it's got to be underpinned by action. Then, number 6, having hope is not the same as achieving the goal. In other words, you can't rest on hope, or you can't rest on your laurels. Sometimes people will get one big opportunity. It's like with the most senior person in the biggest company you could imagine. And if you land this deal, it's going to change your life. And eventually it doesn't materialize and you left high and dry, or you are filled with despair. You come crashing down. And you'll often get salespeople saying, this one's at 90%. I know the person, they're really keen. I always say it might be 90% in terms of the process, but it's at 0% until it's done. And done doesn't mean they phoned you and said, yeah, we're going to go ahead. It's when the contract is signed. No, it's when the money's in the bank and the deal is delivered. And I prefer to treat it like that. It's at 0% until it's done. And then that leads me to the next one, which is that you can't flog dead hope back to life. When you're selling into the corporate space, people earning salaries are not aware of the impact that not replying to people, not updating them on a process has on their level of hope. And you sit there wondering whether you should contact them. Is it going to seem like you're desperate? Is it going to offend them? Is it going to be too soon? Have I left it too late? I wonder what's happening. Have they given it to someone else? You know, you having these endless sleepless nights and worrying about that thing. And there's always a time, okay, it's been 3 weeks now. Maybe it's time to follow up. Do the follow-up, sure, but let it go. As quickly as possible, let those opportunities that are not materializing, let them go and create a new one for yourself. That's where you generate hope. Number 8, hope is not about how, it's about what, and what flows from why. So there are 2 quotes that come to mind here. The first is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince. He was a bit of a dreamer himself, so we don't want to hear too much from him, but he was spot on this one. And he said that if you want people to build a ship, don't herd them together to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work. Rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And this is really useful if you're a leader, where instead of giving your people tasks, you can be asking them, what do you need to plan for tomorrow that will give you hope today? The other one comes from Simon Sinek in his popular TED Talk on the law of diffusion of innovation, and he talks about Martin Luther King, and he says Martin Luther King had a dream. He didn't have a plan. And so he inspired people to buy into his belief, into his why, out of which flowed the what, and the how in those instances takes care of itself. So hope is about inspiration and letting people find out for themselves how they're going to get there. Number 9, hope doesn't happen by itself. You have to generate it. A good example here, your hair during lockdown. It didn't sit around waiting for the hairdresser to come back, did it? It just grew relentlessly on its own. Life is a little bit like that. It kind of keeps moving. Your garden grows. If you're not looking after it, it gets quickly out of control. So life doesn't sit around waiting to drop a lottery ticket for you. It's kind of moving on. And so if you're going to have hope and you think it's going to fall out of the sky, ain't going to happen. If you sit around wishing for it or wishing for something to happen, that is a pathway to despair. Hope is something that you have to generate, and these are the ways that you do it, through a realistic action towards a real possible future event that involves you. So that means that hope itself has to be the commitment. You have to be committed to hope and to creating hope for yourself in order to get yourself moving forward and not falling into despair. And finally, hope must be guarded from attack. What do I mean by that? Well, you get those people who regard themselves as realists, and they're cynical about everything and will always throw a sneer or a sarcastic remark to anybody who says anything optimistic or hopeful. That's often a defense against a repeat of past disappointments, and so you want to put that in its proper place. As much as you don't want to be a dreamer or misled by a dreamer, you also don't want to be a cynic or be brought down by one. You can listen to that cynical voice within yourself or within others to keep your feet on the ground. However, don't let it prevent you from reaching for the stars, or at least creating that new possibility and believing in it. Even if you at some level know that you're doing it to yourself, playing a little trick on yourself, allow that to happen. It's much better than the alternative, which is just allowing that cynicism to take you down into despair. That is where positive thinking is real and applied in action, in that you are creating possibilities for yourself and taking action towards them. Great. So those are the 10 guidelines for generating meaningful hope. I trust that you feel inspired to use those and that you've got value from this. If so, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Neil Bierbaum signing off. Be well and go forth and conquer.